Hi everyone, I'm Any New Province, and this week we're playing Rakdos Tron for Net Benefits, the series where we explore the benefits of net decking in Pauper. This week's super sweet take on the Tron menace comes from False Muffin, who took it to a 5-0 finish in a Magic the Gathering Online Pauper League. Most of us are used to seeing Tron decks that want to gain a ton of life with Pulse of Marasa, establish flicker loops with mnemonic walls, and then eventually close out the game with something like Dinrova Horror, but not False Muffin. Their deck is trying to improve the opinion of Tron players by getting the game over with in a little bit more of a hurry by destroying your opponent's permanents and creatures and then attacking with big creatures of your own. Before I get into the deck tech, I just want to let you know that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Alright, let's have a look at Rakdos Tron. I'm going to start this deck tech off a little bit differently because I want to talk about part of the mana base first. This deck is called Tron because we're running the Urza's lands, which we're trying to assemble like Voltron to generate an insane amount of mana. The three Tron pieces are Urza's Tower, Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Mine, and so long as you have at least one copy of each of these cards on the battlefield, Urza's Mine generates 2 mana, Urza's Power Plant generates 2 mana, and Urza's Tower generates 3 mana. Now that you know how we're generating absolutely ludicrous amounts of mana, let's talk about what we're using that mana for. First, we have Ulamog's Crusher, our favorite way to close out games. Ulamog's Crusher costs 8 generic mana for an Eldrazi that is an 8/8 with Annihilator 2, which means whenever this creature attacks, defending player sacrifices 2 permanents. Ulamog's Crusher attacks each combat if able, but that's alright, we were probably attacking with it anyway. When Tron gets their perfect draws and they run into 8 mana on turn 4 into Ulamog's Crusher, you have to start sacrificing your permanents. There's no way to come back from that. We're also running 4 copies of Wretched Gryff, which can come down on turn 3 so long as we've assembled Urza Tron. Wretched Gryff costs 7 generic mana for a 3/4 flying, and when you cast it, you draw a card. While we'll usually be paying 7 generic mana for our Wretched Gryffs, it also has the Emerge ability for 7 and a blue, and says you may cast this spell by sacrificing a creature and paying the Emerge cost reduced by that creature's converted mana cost. Our final set of creature-based threats that we're going to be closing the game out with starts with Self-Assembler. It costs 5 generic mana for a 4/4, and when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for an Assembly Worker creature card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. While we can only tutor up Self-Assemblers with Self-Assembler's ability, it can be a huge beating if you can cast a few of these in the same turn. Your opponent probably can't deal with multiple 4/4s, so you can start attacking them and getting that life total down to 0. Our Tron mana doesn't have to kill our opponent using creature damage. We have a few alternate ways to kill them just in case they're on something fog based. That package starts with Rolling Thunder. Rolling Thunder costs X red for a sorcery and deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of targets. Hopefully there's going to be one target, it's going to be our opponent, and this is going to be a lethal spell. However, we can wipe their board with this if we have to. We're also running Evenkar's Justice, which is another dual wrath and damage spell. It costs 2 black for a sorcery with buy back 3 mana, which means you may pay an additional 3 generic mana as you cast Evenkar's Justice. If you do, put it into your hand as it resolves. It deals 2 damage to each creature and each player. While it's a bit more restrictive than Rolling Thunder, being able to just cast Evenkar's Justice on turn 4, whether you have Tron or not, might save your life and give you enough time to draw into that Crusher or Rolling Thunder to win the game. Finally, our last damage-based spell is Firebolt. It costs 1 red mana for a sorcery and deals 2 damage to any target, which would be way worse than Shock if this didn't have the flashback ability, which means you can pay 4 and a red to cast Firebolt again out of your graveyard, then you exile it. Most other Tron decks have some form of card selection and card filtering. While those decks are using things like Seagate Oracle or Impulse, we're going to use Read the Bones. Read the Bones costs 2 and a black for a sorcery that allows you to scry 2, then draw 2 cards and lose 2 life. This is really powerful. We can set the top of our library up to get us Tron when we need it, or we can find those threat threats we need to close out the game. Next up are some of the powerful removal spells that I'm sure False Muffin skewed Rakdos for. First, we have Chainer's Edict, which costs 1 and a black for a sorcery and causes target player to sacrifice a creature. You can cast Chainer's Edict again out of your graveyard by paying its flashback cost of 5 black. We're also running 1 copy of Terminate, possibly the best unconditional removal spell in the format. It costs black-red for an instant, destroys target creature, and that creature can't be regenerated. Finally, we have the spiciest inclusion in this deck in 1 copy of Wrecking Ball. It costs 2 black-red for an instant that destroys target creature or land. While our opponents won't have any flipped Search for Azkantas to blow up with our Wrecking Balls, I actually don't mind a little bit of main deck land hate. Some decks draw so badly that you can just destroy the 1 Karoo land that they've been leaning on and completely take over the game with your huge creatures. The last bit of our deck is all about getting us up to enough mana to cast all of our huge spells. The first part of that package is Expedition Map, and it's to help us assemble Tron. That'll give us lots of mana. Expedition Map costs 1 generic mana for an artifact that you can pay to and sacrifice to search your library for a land card, probably a Tron piece, reveal it, put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. Next up is Pristine Talisman, which, while it doesn't help us assemble Tron, can generate more mana to help us power out those expensive spells. Pristine Talisman costs 3 generic mana for an artifact that you can tap for a colorless mana, then you gain a life. The life gain on Pristine Talisman should definitely not be understated here, especially when we're trying to kill our opponent with Evenkar's Justice and cast things like Read the Bones. We're a really slow deck, so we have to buffer our life total to make sure we don't die before we can cast our lethal Rolling Thunder. Next up is Prophetic Prism, which definitely looks at home in Tron decks because they're so bad at generating colored mana off of all of those colorless Tron lands. Prophetic Prism costs 2 generic mana for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, sweet, and you can pay 1 and tap it to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Finally, our last non-land card is Rakdos Signet, which costs 2 generic mana for an artifact that you can pay 1 generic mana and tap for red and black. This is going to help us fix our mana and, like Pristine Talisman, get us a little bit closer to 8 mana to cast an Ulamog's Crusher. Alright, let's have a look at the rest of our mana base, starting with the rest of our non-basics. First, we have some standard Pauper duels in Bloodfell Caves. They enter the battlefield tapped. When they enter the battlefield, they gain you a life, maybe helping shore up those main deck burn matchups along with Pristine Talisman. When they're untapped, you can tap them for black or red. We have 1 copy of Rakdos Guildgate, just another standard Pauper duel to go along with our Bloodfell Caves to help out our mana. We also have 1 copy of Haunted Fengraf. We don't have a lot of creatures in our deck, so whatever creature Haunted Fengraf gets back is probably going to be quality. We're running 1 copy of Polluted Mire that we can tutor out with our Expedition Map so that we can cycle it for 2 generic mana to draw a new card off the top of our deck. Alright, let's have a look at this sideboard. First, we have 3 copies of Duress for pulling counterspells out of our opponent's hand when we're on a big Rolling Thunder turn. We have 2 copies of Gorilla Shaman for blowing up a bunch of artifact lands, and 1 copy of Shattering Pulse if our opponent is on more artifacts than Gorilla Shaman can deal with. We have 4 copies of Pyroblast for fighting against blue decks, again to get rid of those counterspells on big turns. We have 2 copies of Nihil Spellbomb because we're a slow deck and we have to get rid of the graveyards of other slow decks. We have 1 more copy of Wrecking Ball, maybe to hit an opposing Karoo land, or if we just need more removal in a creature heavy matchup, and we have 2 copies of Electrickery for wrathing the board of X1s. And there you have it, Rakdos Tron by False Muffin. Congratulations again on your 5-0 finish. We're going to take this deck into a league at twitch.tv/AnyNewProvince this Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Atlantic time. We're there every Wednesday night playing competitive Pauper decks. Before I go, I just want to remind you that you can like the video or subscribe to the channel down below. I'd seriously appreciate it. It's a great way to let me know you've enjoyed everything, and it really encourages me to keep making great Pauper content. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech, and hopefully I'll see you on Wednesday night.